Welcome to the Writer Reads The Strays of Lunar One, Book 1, The Unwilling, Chapter 16, Extrication. Can you drop us off without stopping? Oliver asked a few minutes later. You mean like, slow down, you guys jump out and I keep driving? The kid asked. Oliver nodded. And then keep going to the cabin, drop off the basket, and so on. You see where I'm going with this? The kid nodded. You're thinking to fool the trackers? If they have any. Oh, they'll have them, but I can suggest one better. Go on. I, Go on. I take you to the cottage, we stop, you get out and make sure you spread your presents real good, then come back to the cab and I start driving back to town. Pretty sure Wendy asked me to pick her up something fresh from Micker's on the way back. Micker's? Oliver asked. Local farm, the kid said casually. They grow some of the best deer gone in the region. Got a nice pack of merrimaw to guard them too. Oliver studied him, looking for any form of deception, and the kid shrugged. It's up to you, but it's what I would do if I was aware, needing to get someone to believe I was around somewhere I'd hired. Especially if I wanted to keep the locals out of strife. Oliver shook his head, smiling at the kid's logic. So you haven't done this often then? He stated. And the kid solemnly shook his head. Never, he declared. This is a one-off. His scent barely changed, and Oliver almost believed him. Almost. All right, he said. We'll do it your way. The kid gave him a grim smile. You going to need hike gear? Oliver shook his head. No, we'll run easier without gear. You'll need something to carry your clothes in, the kid pointed out, or do you not shred your kit when you change? Truth was they did, and Oliver hadn't thought of it. The lupari spent most of their time in their natural form, which was similar to the werewolf hybrid. They rarely shifted to human form, so the clothing question was usually moot. Wares, on the other hand. What do you suggest? He asked. Satchels, the boy told him. I think there are a couple up at the cabin. They'll cost you extra, but you'll be able to take the food you've been given and whatever other personal belongings you might have. Harness should shift with you to all fours, too. One day, I'm going to need the name of your supplier, Oliver told him, and the kid chuckled. Well, when that day comes, you know where to find me, he said, turning the cab onto a side road. The radio crackled as he did so, and he tapped a button on the dash. Oliver watched in silent amazement as the panel slid aside, revealing a small screen. He didn't recognize the face that appeared. These guys have some pull, the man said. Customs just cleared them. ETA, 30 minutes. In town? The kid asked as the cab sped up. We've managed to put them in the outer field, but you'll need to hurry if you're to get them through on time. Gotcha, the kid said as bushes and trees sped by outside the cab. I'll call you when I've picked up Wendy's order. You better. They're howling for transport, and we've just told them the only cab in town has already been booked by a couple of tourists. Oliver winced at the term couple, but he said nothing. And the man on the screen didn't seem to notice. The kid hit the button again, and the view screen vanished behind a solid panel. He glanced over at Oliver. You heard the man. Howlin' tells me it's ravelin'. Wendy's order tells me I can go ahead with the plan. You in? The cab came to a skidding halt in front of a small stone cottage surrounded by a low stone wall. Oliver nodded, and the kid pointed at the door. Then get moving. You've got 5 minutes before I leave you to find another escape plan. Oliver moved, Lewis following close behind with the basket. Together they went through the front door and onto the cottage porch. Oliver unlocked the front door and they moved through the cottage, sitting briefly on the sofas and turning on the television in the tiny lounge before turning down the covers on the bunks in the attic. It wasn't a big house. The ground floor consisted of the kitchen, dining room, and lounge, with a small bathroom, laundry in the back. Sleeping quarters were in a loft. Oliver set the basket on the kitchen table, and Lewis went through the cupboards. They found the satchels and harnesses hanging on hooks behind the bedroom door. It didn't take long to transfer the food into them or to program clean fatigues into the fabricator sitting at one end of the room. 5 minutes, right? Lewis asked, eyeing the machine. You go. I'll bring them, Oliver ordered, and Lewis didn't argue. The driver had started the engine and was giving the ware the choice of going with him or getting out when Oliver arrived. He was relieved to see Lewis hadn't threatened the boy. 5 minutes did not mean 7, the youngster grouched as he spun his tires and sent the cab spearing down the road. Now we have to hurry. Oliver wasn't sure he'd call the ride that followed hurrying. It was more like dancing with suicide. The cab slid sideways onto the main road, screeching its tires as it fought for traction. If something comes along now, Oliver thought, clinging to the armrest. He looked over at Lewis, who had braced himself in the corner between the seat and the door frame. His face was as pale as milk. The ride to Micka's wasn't something either of them wanted to repeat, but Oliver feared the running had only just begun. Micka met them with a shotgun slung over one arm and a blaster hanging from a strap across his shoulder. He was a grizzled man who reminded Oliver of a cross between an old ogre and a wizened dwarf. His eyes roved over both ways before settling on Oliver. Change behind the boning shed. Dog will show you the way. He whistled sharply, laying a hand on the head of the giant hound that bounded to sit beside him. West side, he instructed shortly, then gestured to Oliver and Lewis. Play nice. The dog gave a happy wuff and bounced over to Oliver, his hackles rising as he approached. Guests, the ogre dwarf told him, then repeated firmly, West side. The dog propped, looked the two wares up and down, wuffed once, and bounded toward a cluster of buildings on the other side of the farm. Oliver tossed a cred stick through the window of the cab as he left, ignoring the startled shout from the driver. He figured the kid deserved something for the wear and tear he'd inflicted on the cab on their behalf. The dog didn't stop when he reached the buildings, but tore down the side of the nearest one and scrabbled around the corner at the far end. To Oliver's surprise, they were expected, a young woman ushering them into a small shed at the rear. 2 minutes, she told them. They're coming. Oliver wanted to ask how that was possible, given they'd only just vacated the cab, but they didn't have time. He led Lewis through the door and shucked out of his torn ship suit, stuffing it into the satchel alongside the flat-packed fatigues. They could dispose of them later. As soon as they were done, he slid into the harness and shifted to his wolf form. It was different to the giant Merimois, but not so different they couldn't blend in with the pack, and the dog's sheer size hid how big they were. The woman eyed them as they emerged, and Oliver was relieved the door had given way to a single nudge from his nose. Well, you boys sure scrub up nice, she exclaimed, and Oliver didn't know whether to be flattered or offended. She didn't give him time to consider it, but pointed to the dog that had greeted them. Spider will take you to the outer marker. After that, you're on your own. Northwest is mostly wilderness, but you could encounter all sorts that way, so be careful. Most of this world is uncharted and unmonitored. It was vague as warnings went, but the best he could expect from a frontier world. He whuffed a brief thank you and cocked his ears towards Spider. Spider? He thought. Weird name for a dog. Lewis clearly thought so too. He whined inquiringly, and the woman gave him a pat on the head. Oliver tensed, preparing to intervene, but Lewis merely flattened his ears and flinched away. She raised her hand and laid her fingers against her lips. I'm sorry, she blushed. I didn't think. Lewis wagged his tail at her, but circled wide enough to stay beyond her reach. Oliver whuffed at Spider, and the big dog gave him a disdainful look, the kind that made Oliver bristle. If Spider thought he could take him, the dog had another think coming. Remembering who and what he was, Oliver forced the instinctive challenge back in his throat. Now was not the time to start a dogfight. If they were lucky, they'd be out of the furry monster's territory in a few minutes, and the point would be moot. After a moment's hesitation, Spider turned and trotted a few paces northwest. His path took them over a wooden fence and across an empty field, but it wasn't until they got to a 3-meter high fence that he paused, looking back at them with wary doubt. When he saw he had both their attention, he rumbled a low warning and looked at the fence. Oliver cocked his head, whining inquiringly, and the dog looked him over. As if in answer, Spider trotted to a gate in the fence and rumbled a second warning before leading them through a gate that opened when he placed his very broad paw on a panel in the ground. He stood there, holding the gate, and gave a commanding woof, looking from Oliver and Lewis to the opening. Oliver obeyed, trotting warily past him and through to the other side. Spider followed as soon as their tails had cleared the barrier, and the gate clanged shut behind him. Both wolves stepped aside to let him take the lead into the enclosure beyond. He studied them both as he passed, but kept walking. Oliver watched him, not moving until the Marinois looked back and gave them another commanding woof, at which point Oliver glanced at Lewis and whuffed a command to follow. As soon as Spider saw they were following, he trotted forward, winding his way through low shrubby bushes and past rough-barked tree trunks. As they moved forward, Oliver caught the scent of several other dogs. Some followed, but others kept their distance, as though they were pickets in a line of animals guarding the narrow corridor between them and the perimeter fence. He closed the distance between himself and their guide, relieved to feel Lewis come alongside. Spider did not look back, but took them to a second door on the other side of the enclosure and let them through. The entire journey had taken them about a half hour. This time, Spider did not follow them through the gate, but stopped on his side and let the gate fall shut behind them. When Oliver looked back, the Marama waved his shaggy tail, letting his tongue loll out in a sign of contentment. The big dog was glad to see them go, and Oliver couldn't help feeling unwanted. He shook it off quickly and glanced at the sky, hoping the sinking sun indicated west as he angled to what should be slightly north of it. He could feel Spider's eyes on them as he led Lewis into the scrub opposite the fence and broke into a swift run. What had the man on the console said? 30 minutes? It had taken them slightly longer than that to clear the farm. Oliver tried to do the calculations, even as he kept his nose alert for the musky scent of a predator or the bitter scent of danger. His ears ached with searching for the rumble of a shuttle or the higher pitch of a flitter moving on their trail. The woman on the farm had said 2 minutes, and the man that had greeted them had appeared jumpy. How much time had they really had? He didn't know, and had no way of telling until he reached a point where he could use his tablet. And that was assuming he could hook into the planetary network without being traced. Part of him had doubts.